5 pages. Matthew, can you get the lights, please? All right, so we have to finish up just a couple things here. Just to start here, when we talk about diffusion and osmosis, heat becomes important. Okay? And what does it mean? What is heat energy? When you add heat to a material, what happens to it? Not get closer together. They what?
They move away.
They can expand. Also, how do they move? The speed of the molecule. Yeah, they move faster. Okay? Heat energy causes molecules to vibrate faster. That's what heat is, the vibration of molecules. So if we imagine sort of what the molecules of a solid, liquid, and gas look like, in a solid, the molecules are sort of in a regular arrangement. They're just sort of vibrating back and forth without a significant amount of movement. If we compare that to a liquid, the molecules have more freedom to move. They're moving from place to place. They're moving more quickly. And in a gas, the molecules are flying sort of all over the place. Okay? They're moving the quickest. So in which state of matter do you think diffusion happens the quickest? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, in gases. Okay, because those quick moving molecules bounce around the molecules, causing diffusion to happen more quickly. Okay? And molecules diffuse because of sort of this random motion that happens in all matter. So we can cause diffusion to happen more quickly by adding heat. Okay, when I've been doing these experiments, like the starch or the molasses experiment, I try to get hot water out of the sink. Okay? That's because I want it to take place more quickly. So the warmer the molecules, the faster osmosis and diffusion will take place. There's another factor that can influence how quickly molecules diffuse, and that's surface area. The greater an area of that membrane through which molecules are moving, the faster diffusion will take place. And this becomes important when we're talking about the human body. Now, for example, I talked about this earlier. Which of these cups of water is warmer? Matthew? The one on the left. Molecules diffuse more quickly in the one on the left. Now, we just talked earlier today about in the human body, molecules diffusing from our intestine into our bloodstream or from our lungs into our bloodstream. And there's other types of transport which can move molecules in the opposite way. Okay? So what we've been talking about so far in our unit is what we call passive transport. In passive transport, no energy is needed. Molecules just will move from a high to low concentration without anything making them move that way, without adding any energy. So osmosis and diffusion are examples of passive transport. But there are times when molecules need to be moved in the opposite direction. Sometimes molecules have to be forced to move from a low to a high concentration. In order to do that, it requires some energy. Because the molecules don't do that on their own. So the organism has to expend some energy to move molecules in the other way. And often this happens through these large proteins that are stuck in the cell membrane. One example is this protein called the proton pump, which takes hydrogen nuclei and pumps them out of the cell. But you'll notice there's a high concentration of these protons on the outside, a lower concentration inside. So this is going the opposite of what we would normally think it would. So in order to do this, it requires some energy. Okay? It's like when we talked about the 7th graders, I jammed all the 7th graders in this classroom. Okay? If I just open the door, they would disperse on your own. I wouldn't have to tell people to move from place to place, going from a high to a low concentration. But if I crammed all the 7th graders in this room, would any 9th graders voluntarily come in here?
No.
No. But I could look for one in the hallway. And I could grab them, and I could force them into this room. I can make them go from this low concentration into a high concentration. But they're not going to do it on their own. I'm going to have to exert a small amount of energy. So I could do that. I could make them move into this crowded area. That would be an example of active transport. Okay, to finish up here, we'll just talk about surface area. And that surface area is very important in the human body. Think about how our digestive system works, absorbing nutrients from our food. We eat our food, it is digested in our stomach and small intestine, and as it moves, the nutrients are absorbed through diffusion. But our small intestine is not like, it's not like a garden hose, it's not just like a smooth tube that winds through our body. If you were to look on the inside of our intestine, it's actually made of these, all of these ridges. It's all covered in these, they're called villi, okay? They're all these bumps and ridges. What that does is it increases the surface area through which our blood can absorb those nutrients. If our intestines were just like smooth pipe, like a hose, and you were to take someone's intestines, open them all up, the surface area would be about the size of your desk, about 1.5 square meters. That's the area through which we would be able to absorb nutrients. But because of all these ridges that are actually in our intestine, okay, if you look at the surface area of someone's intestines, actually 250 square meters, about 2 basketball courts of surface area through which we absorb nutrients. So it's the size of your desk compared to 2 full basketball courts. That's what all those ridges do for us. They expand the surface area, giving a much greater area through which diffusion can happen to get those nutrients into our blood. The same is true in our lungs. Your lungs are not just like 2 balloons that inflate and deflate. They're actually made of all these clusters. They look like clusters of grapes or broccoli. They're called alveoli. They're these little air sacs. And each of these little air sacs, okay, inflates, and each one is surrounded by blood vessels so that oxygen and carbon dioxide can diffuse. And that makes the surface area of our lungs about 160 square meters. So about a full-size basketball court. That's the surface area inside of our lungs. So again, that gives us this very large area through which we can absorb all the oxygen that we're going to need in order to survive. Okay, this is just a review here. So if I have my dialysis tubing sac, and I put in it 98% water, 2% salt, what happens when I put it in distilled water, 100% water? What would happen to that? Maya? Water will go into it, from a high to a low concentration, causing it to expand. What if I put it in 90% water, 10% salt? What will happen to it? Shane?
Oh, the water will go out of it.
The water will leave it and it will shrink. What if I put it in something that's 98% water, 2% salt? Abby?
It'll stay the same.
It'll stay the same, its size won't change. Molecules still move through it, but in equal ways back and forth, so its overall size and mass will not change. Okay, the last slide I have for you today has to do with looking at how osmosis can affect cells. There's an extra one there. Fire, Raymond? Sorry, we're keeping it. All right, so we know that cells placed in very salty water, what will happen to them? They shrink, they shrivel up, they lose water from their cytoplasm. Donovan, question? All right, so this process is called plasmolysis. Okay? And so, we have two examples I'll show you. This first one is red onion. You've seen a red onion, they're kind of purple, not really red. The reason that they have that color is because their cytoplasm has a pigment in it that makes it this purple color. Okay? So right now, when you look up at this red onion before, what do these white lines represent? Or what part of the cell is that?
Cell membranes.
Right now it is the cell membrane and the cell wall. You're going to see it's going to change in a minute. Okay? So filling up these cells, how much of the cell is filled up with the cytoplasm?
You're gonna ask me still?
Sure.
Alright, all the area that doesn't have a different thing.
Yeah, basically all of it. The cells are filled up with the cytoplasm. Now, this is a video I'll show you, and what they've done is they've added salt water. So, if you watch, you'll see things, it's sort of subtle, but you'll see things start to change after the salt water has been added. Especially towards the top of the video, what do you see more of? More white space. What's happening to the contents of those cells? Laura? What's that?
The salt is like taking space.
Yeah. Water is leaving that cytoplasm, causing it to sort of contract and sort of shrivel up, leaving there that empty space that you see. There's a lot more white space now than there was at the beginning. Okay? So this is going, then they add back regular water, go back to original. This is Elodea, it should look familiar because we've looked at it before. So if we look at these Elodea, you can see all the cell walls, you can see the chloroplasts in there. When we add salt water to the Elodea, it takes a little while, and it's kind of subtle, but you eventually see things start to change when you look at these. Okay, and what you see again is the cytoplasm shrinking, the cell membrane shrinking, gathering sort of all the chloroplasts into the middle of the cell, and so you can see those changes. All right, so I'm going to I'll show you on this page I just gave you. I want you to make some drawings, but hold on a second.
They do karaoke in there.